Good afternoon and welcome back to the auditorium. Next, we have a keynote speech from Andrew Keen, who is an entrepreneur and author, also the founder of Andrew Keen Productions, Inc., and he is from Berkeley, United States of America. Today, he will be speaking on how to fix the smart city future. Please welcome Andrew Keen to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to be here. So nice to be in Barcelona. So I'm going to talk for about 22 minutes exactly, and then we'll have questions afterwards. So I guess I've been invited as the miserable guy who's going to give you some warnings about all the stuff you see out there, all the glossy stuff, all the great seductive qualities of smart cities. Because, of course, smart cities are the new thing, the thing that's supposed to change the world, to make the world a better place. These smart cities seem not only inevitable in technological terms, but they can't fail, can they? Just as the internet couldn't fail back 25 years ago. You walk out there, we were promised about the internet that it would democratize, that it would civilize us, that it would enrich our culture, that it would create a level playing field for entrepreneurs, that it would solve the problem of economic inequality, that it would create lots of jobs. Well, of course, the reverse is true. What we have in our digital revolution these days is radical inequality. What we have is the looming crisis of AI, which is taking away our jobs. What we have is a cultural crisis on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram of incivility and hatred and fake news, a loneliness increasingly created by digital revolution. And above all else, what we have is a failed business model of Silicon Valley, which is giving out their products for free and then turning the user, whether it's the Google user or the Facebook user or the Instagram user, turning them into the product, mining our data, our most intimate parts of ourselves, and destroying our privacy. So the internet hasn't worked out so great, although, of course, in other respects, it's great. And I was around in the 90s. I was actually founder of a company called Audio Cafe back then. We believed that the revolution, we believed in the digital revolution. We thought that the shiny stuff out there, the sexy stuff, the seductive stuff was real. And we failed. And now, increasingly, more and more Silicon Valley pioneers of one kind or other, like Tim Berners-Lee, who invented the World Wide Web, we acknowledge we failed, and we agree that we need to start again. So I'm bringing some historical wisdom, in a sense, as a pioneer of the original digital revolution to you. I'm going to try and remind you of the dangers of the ideology, the sexiness, the seductiveness of smart cities. Because you go out there, and I was wandering around the floor, you see, smart Dubai, smart Shenzhen, above all else, perhaps ironically, smart Moscow, chilling. All these places which are smart, but what does it mean to be a smart city, and what are the implications for us as human beings? What should we be wary of, and how do we, I just wrote a book called How to Fix the Future, how are we going to fix the future of smart cities? The first thing I think that I'm going to argue that's really important is when people sell you the future, don't believe it. When people sell you an abstraction of the future, when people tell you that the future doesn't exist, they're wrong. The future always exists. The future is something that's concrete. Whenever people make abstract arguments that have no concrete context, they're selling you something that doesn't exist. Smart cities do indeed exist, and I'm going to talk about two or three as examples, firstly of warnings, but also of possible solutions to all the challenges of the smart city. Now, I'm from San Francisco, which is, of course, the heart of the digital revolution, the San Francisco Bay Area, which is where Google and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Apple, they all make their homes. This is the ground zero of our digital revolution. This is the place that's architecting the brave new world of digital technology. But what does it look like as a city? What kind of place is it? I actually live over the bay now in Berkeley, but I used to live in San Francisco, and I'm very familiar with it. Let me begin my little tour, a brief tour of San Francisco, by taking you down to Battery Street, down by the bay. Some of you may have been to San Francisco. Battery Street is one of the long streets snaking its way through the commercial district, the commercial part of San Francisco, where most of these big digital companies are situated. On Battery Street, you go past a place called The Battery. It's the new in-place for Silicon Valley millionaires and billionaires. It's a club designed to foster creativity and openness and democracy. It was designed to be a different kind of club from the traditional clubs of San Francisco, which were situated up on the hill, on the appropriately named Nob Hill, where the knobs live, where the privileged, where the aristocracy. Battery Club was situated down below because it was supposed to be an equalizer. It was supposed to be open. It was built on all the language, the traditional discourse ideology, verbiage of the digital revolution: openness, transparency, democratization. But of course, the reality of the Battery Club is just the reverse. Just as the digital revolution has disappointed us, the Battery Club is a place where it costs a huge amount of money to join, where the founder, a guy called Michael Birch, sold his company for $350 million to AOL. It's a new place of privilege. And San Francisco itself reflects all the troubling inequalities of the digital age. San Francisco is a place when you go out the doors of the Battery, and the Battery inside, it's anything but transparent. Can't see inside, the windows are frosted over. But when you go out into the streets of San Francisco, you see armies of homeless people. You see everyone driving around as Uber drivers, and the research shows that those Uber drivers are earning less than the minimum wage. You see such an enormous spike in real estate prices and rental prices, partly through so-called sharing platforms like Airbnb, that most ordinary people, firemen, teachers, policemen, ordinary people can't live in San Francisco. And the Bay Area itself is an example of the new kind of feudalism, the so-called campuses of these trillion-dollar companies like Google and Facebook and Amazon and Apple. These are separate from the community. So San Francisco is a warning. It's a dystopia. And of course, it's appropriately dystopian in the sense that these companies are inventing, they are pioneering a new kind of surveillance capitalism, because their products are designed, as I said earlier, to mine us. So they're destroying our privacy. Now, San Francisco is not quite as surveillant as other cities around the world, perhaps like London. Not everyone is being watched. But the inequality, the crisis of 21st century urban life in San Francisco is really shocking. It's a place not of inclusivity. It's not a place of any kind of urban values. And indeed, the sort of the symbol of how San Francisco has gone wrong, it's become a huge issue locally over the last year, is the fact that wherever you walk in San Francisco, there's human excrement on the street. In other words, the city is full of shit. And it's there because the homeless can't find toilets. It's there because of the disappearance of public space. It's there because of the failure of San Francisco to reinvent itself, to incorporate any kind of egalitarianism or civic pride in the 21st century. This is a warning. It's not just my warning. You just have to go to San Francisco to see the future. It's deeply troubling. It's a warning about the lack of regulation. It's the warning about the way in which technology takes over the world unless it's controlled, unless it's regulated, unless it's properly managed by city managers. Now, outside the Battery, the club that's supposed to change the world but actually just enforces the very inequalities that I'm talking about, outside the Battery is a plaque with a quote from Winston Churchill. Of course, Winston Churchill is always being quoted. Wherever we go, we stumble across quotes from Winston Churchill. This is a good quote from Churchill. He was talking about buildings. And he was saying what he said so famously, and in a sort of typically Churchillian brevity and profundity, he said, "We shape our buildings and then those buildings shape us. We shape our buildings and then those buildings shape us." San Francisco now is shaping us in all the inequalities of the world. Marshall McLuhan, the great 20th century Canadian techno-futurist, in his brilliant way, played with Churchill's quote, and he said, we build our technology, and then that technology builds us. So that's the warning. We need to shape our technology before the technology shapes us. We need to design worlds that won't end in San Francisco, of feudal inequality, of surveillance capitalism, of shit in the street. How are we going to do it? How can we fix the future of the smart city? It's also worth noting that San Francisco could be worse. It could be a place where everyone is watching everyone else. It could be a place like Google or Facebook of surveillance capitalism. So San Francisco still remains free in a sense. There's still some hope for San Francisco. In the greatest movie, in my view, the reason I wrote a book in 2012 called Digital Vertigo, which was a riff on Hitchcock's Vertigo. It's the ultimate film. It's a wake-up call about falling in love with something that doesn't exist. Hitchcock, at the beginning of the film, there's a scene where the guy who's actually perpetrating the myth, the lie, the invention of a woman, actually, a blonde woman who doesn't really exist, who Jimmy Stewart falls in love with and ruins his life over. The guy says, San Francisco is not what it was. San Francisco is not what it was. It's lost that urban feel. It's lost all the value of a city, a place of equality, a place of public space, even sufficient public space for there to be lavatories. There still are parks, of course. There's still a degree of public space. But that public space is increasingly being destroyed or undermined by social and economic inequality. So how do we fix that? How do we fix the future, not only of smart cities, but of our digital age? In my book, How to Fix the Future, I lay out 5 points, 5 ways in which we can focus on fixing the future. But there's a meta level also to the book, a meta argument. That meta-argument focuses on agency. In my book, I fall back on another great dystopian track, just as Hitchcock's movie Vertigo is really a film about waking us up, reminding us that we should never fall in love with illusion, that we need to be realistic. A book that did that brilliantly was Thomas More's Utopia, his early 16th century book about our responsibility to collectively to make the world a better place. I come up with a term in my book, the sort of uber term, the meta term, to describe the way in which we can collectively fix our future, not just technologically, but also for smart cities. I come up with the idea of Moore's law, not Gordon Moore of Intel, who came up with a law about computer chips doubling every 18 months, but Thomas More's law, our responsibility of humans to make the world a better place. So Moore's law matters. And the issue at the core of Moore's law and the core of our world is agency. We've invented technology, particularly AI, that replicates us, that does most of what we do. The great challenge for human beings, both inside and outside cities, is figuring out, what do we do in the new age? What is our role? Because we have technology now that self-drives cars. We have technology that's able to know the law and engineering and medicine better than ever we do. So what's our place? Our place has to be agency, because and when I say agency, I mean the human ability to be creative, to think for itself, the human ability to be empathetic. That's the one area that the algorithm can't touch. And that's the responsibility, I think, of a smart city. It needs to be a place that encourages human agency, a place of public space, a place of civic value, a place that encourages Moore's law, not Gordon Moore, not a place that fetishizes technology, and there's too much fetishization of technology out there, as if technology is the solution. Technology is never the solution. to problems of technology. There is no app to fix the future, and there's certainly no app or technology, whether it's blockchain or virtual reality or anything else, to fix the future of the smart city. Agency then matters. We shape our buildings, and then those buildings shape us. We build our technology, and then that technology builds us. We need to make sure that we're always empowered over that technology, that the technology is human. And the challenge, I think, when it comes to smart cities is architecting cities that value the human, that bring out agency, that bring out the creative. The great smart cities of the future will be places which will be algorithm-free. Now, that doesn't mean that there won't be technology. That doesn't mean that the technology won't exist. You know, I'm as wired as anyone. I carry my supercomputer around in my pocket, and maybe one day I'll carry it around on my arm or my brain. Those things are probably inevitable because of Gordon Moore's law. But the real value of the smart city of the future is where we can use our human ingenuity, the very thing, agency, the very thing that the algorithm can't do, that software can't do, to have goals, to be creative, to be empathetic. So that needs to be the focus of the smart city. Let me lay out 5 core strategies to do this. I have 5 tools in my book. They are all essential. You can't fix the future with just one of these tools. Regulation matters. I see in Barcelona the beginnings of a very intelligent regulation, for example, on Airbnb, that maintains the civic value of the city by regulating Airbnb. The same is true of Uber. The smart city, the livable smart city of the future, is not infused with technology, but it's shaped in a way to guarantee innovators a level playing field. It's created in a way to try to guarantee a degree of economic inequality. It's shaped as the un-San Francisco, as anything but feudal, the modern city, a place of equality and innovation and vitality. Regulation then matters. Regulators at the city level need to be very active in designing technology, not just for efficiency, not just at the altar of utilitarianism, but in guaranteeing a high quality of civic life. That is essential. You're seeing examples already from big-time EU regulators like Vertigo in Brussels. She's not a city regulator, but her attacks on the titans of Silicon Valley, whether it's on the antitrust front or forcing them to pay taxes or forcing them to be accountable for the garbage they allow to be published on their platforms, this is a beginning. Don't then shrink from regulation. But regulation in itself is not sufficient. On its own, if you just fall back on regulation, you destroy innovation. We also need a new wave of entrepreneurs who are creating products for the smart cities which encourage urban values, which shape a new kind of city, of sharing, of public space, a city of openness rather than the closed, dominant winner-take-all platforms of Silicon Valley. We're beginning to see this in Europe. In one of the chapters in my book, I go to Germany. The Germans have always been very good at re-engineering capitalism. And I think that the German cities, and Berlin in particular, is doing some really, really interesting things in terms of focusing on building habitable cities of the 21st century rather than the dystopian version of Silicon Valley. We need citizens, of course, to be engaged, to be fully engaged. We need consumers to be more demanding of their products. Those are the 3rd and the 4th pillars in my argument about fixing the future. And finally, we need education. Education needs to be reinvented. Now, out there, they will tell you that technology is essential for enlightenment. They will tell you that the schools should be full of iPads and iPhones, and everyone needs to be connected. And the more connectivity they have, the wiser they become, the richer the culture of the smart city, the smarter we become. But the reverse is actually true. We're seeing that in San Francisco. The wealthy, the privileged, the technocratic aristocracy, They don't allow their kids to use iPhones or iPads. They send their children to new kinds of schools, like the Waldorf school, which not only discourages, but actually doesn't allow the use of technology in classrooms. Steve Jobs didn't let his kids get their hands on his invention, the iPhone or the iPad, his greatest inventions. I think then education is central to the future of the smart city, but it needs not to be an anti-technological, not a Luddite education, but an education that focuses on what it means to be human. As I said, agency matters. We can't become algorithms. We don't need educational systems that try to turn us into algorithms. That's what the industrial age did, understandably, because we needed mini computers back then. Now we don't. We can't beat these new algorithms at Go or chess. We can't beat them at finding their way around cities or driving cars or figuring out legal problems or medical problems. But we can produce a new generation, an enlightened generation of kids who know how to work with this technology and who focus on real human values, whether it's the empathy, creativity that I talk about, or the value of urban life that is so central in the history of civilization. Now, in my book, I've only got a minute and a half left, so this is very brief. There are places that are beginning to experiment with a better kind of urban life, a better kind of government. I go to Singapore, smart city state. I'm ambivalent about Singapore because of its questionable democratic credentials, but it's a beginning. I go to Estonia. Estonia is the future. If you want to find a model, a real model, not an abstraction, not a fantasy, not some beautiful blonde woman who doesn't really exist. If you want to see the way in which the future is really being built in a positive way, go to Estonia. Go to Tallinn. I spent I visited Tallinn 3 or 4 times. I spoke to the Prime Minister. I spoke to many people there. What's happening in Estonia is that the digital future, whether it's the smart city or the smart country, it's being architected by responsible politicians and entrepreneurs. And most of the so-called bureaucrats or regulators, they have a background in innovation. They're entrepreneurs. So if you want to build a smart city, you're not going to do it with bureaucrats. You're not going to do it with people who have spent 40 years working for a local government. You need entrepreneurs. What's really interesting about the Estonian experiment in digital democracy is it's trying to architect a new kind of social contract on data between government, which is required to be transparent, and citizens. It protects the self. It's designed to encourage a new kind of individualism. And finally, let me end with a warning. I warned at the beginning about San Francisco, which in my mind is the nightmare of unregulated capitalism, a winner-take-all society of increasingly horrifying inequality of economic and cultural forces. But there's another monstrous reality on the horizon, which in some ways is even more chilling than San Francisco. It's the other end of the stack. It's China. And the Chinese model of what I would call surveillance authoritarianism. The Chinese model is to do away with political rights. The Chinese model is to build a data totalitarian network where everyone is watched all the time. The Chinese model, of course, encourages an all-too-smart city. The danger of the future are cities or algorithms or networks or homes, and certainly government officers who are too smart. So if there is an overall message to you, we need in the future to maintain a space for stupidity. Data doesn't solve our human problems. Smartness is a warning. In this cult of smartness, and perhaps even in the cult of the smart city, you have the seeds of a really terrifying totalitarianism, which in China is being successfully exported to the rest of the world. So be careful with what you wish for. Don't dream too big, and don't believe in abstraction. Don't believe in fantasy. Focus on the here and now. Building smart cities is a lot of work. It will take several generations. There is no app to fix the future of smart cities or anything else. But I wish you well. It's your responsibility. The future of urban life lies with you in the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Right, we now have an opportunity for you to ask questions. You can see that there are microphones placed in the aisles. I also have some questions on the Ask and Vote Slido app as well, so you can submit questions to me as well. But does anyone want to ask anything? Okay, I'll start with
Well, it wasn't very controversial, was it? So.
No, we do have questions.
Okay.
They're currently...
And we're both from North London, so we represent a certain kind of urbanity, yes? Although she's from Holloway and I'm from Golders Green, so...
You're...
Arsenal and Tottenham.
Your
How
part's
does
a
it
lot.
work?
Oh, who is that?
I'm here.
Oh, there you are.
May I first thank you for your more critical note in this whole area? Because you're the first one I've been going to that has a more sharp vision on it's not all smart and beautiful and glossy. However, as I am from the municipality of Amsterdam, we're looking at smart cities, I have a question for you. What is your view, especially because you just pointed out China, of the beautiful platforms that, for instance, Huawei and other platform technologies are giving? Do you see problems in that? Do you see there's data governance issues for on a private level as well as a government level? What is your vision about it?
It's a good question. And by the way, I'm a huge fan of Amsterdam, and I think I didn't mention Amsterdam, but I think Amsterdam is another positive example.
I would like to invite you to come to
Yeah,
talk
well, I
about
come
your
all the time, so you see me afterwards. So, yeah, it's a good question. So the lady asked the question, well, sorry, what was your name? What was your name? You have to give your name. Not everything about yourself, just your name.
Sigrid Ingeborg Jurissen.
Okay, Siegfried. So the question was, should we, I mean, basically your question was, should we trust these new platforms, especially these Chinese platforms? I don't think we should trust any platforms. I mean, in the American case, there's no ideological element to Facebook or Google. They don't care what we think. They just want to sell our data. They just want to make money. These are private corporations. The chilling thing, though, about the Chinese platforms is they are for-profit, and they're very brilliant, and I think their technology in some ways is much more innovative than the US. If I was going to bet, at least technologically, on the future, I'd probably bet on China rather than Silicon Valley. But the problem with these companies is they have very, very murky relations with the state. Now, I'm not an expert on this, but from what I've read, there is very little independence of these companies from the state. So the reality is, if you use these platforms, I'm not sure that would happen in Amsterdam, but if you use these platforms for the collection of data, you need to be very careful about how these new Chinese platforms then use the data. The really terrifying thing about China is that their new kind of colonial scheme for investing in the rest of the world is to build infrastructure, particularly in Africa, and build these new platforms. But along with the supposed generosity of the Chinese state are deals in which these Chinese companies have access to the data of these countries, to the people of these countries. And the future of international politics is of data wars. He, and it will always be a he who owns the most data has the most power. So if you are from a developing country and you are doing deals with the Chinese in terms of them investing in your digital infrastructure, you need to be really careful about the data relationship. You need to be very careful about how they can use it, because Chinese capitalism is not like Western capitalism. It's much more statist, and the relationship between the state and these companies is much more troubling. So it's a really important question. And indeed, this confrontation between the Chinese model of surveillance authoritarianism and Western democracy will become, or is becoming, the new Cold War of the 21st century. The 20th century, we quote, in the West, with our democracy, we beat the Soviet Union, we beat the Russians because their system clearly failed. It was a disaster. It was self-evidently absurd. The challenge today is that our democracies in the West aren't working. They're producing authoritarian leaders like Trump. They're not being trusted anymore. They're being undermined by fake news. So our work is cut out much more in this new Cold War between democracy and surveillance authoritarianism, particularly because surveillance authoritarianism works and seems to generate much more wealth. Whoops.
Thank you. I've got one question that I can squeeze in. Who should surveillance data in cities belong to?
Wow, that's a good question. Where does the data belong? Now, Tim Berners-Lee wants to, the founder of the World Wide Web, and it's a really important question, actually. It's probably the most important question of them all. Where should the data, who owns the data? Now, Tim Berners-Lee wants to re-decentralize the internet so that nobody owns the data except us. In Brussels, they've passed the General Data Protection Law, which gives data back to consumers, which gives data back to citizens. I think those things are attractive, but perhaps the ownership of data should be thought of in public terms. The ownership of data, maybe we look at the Scandinavians, where data becomes public, where as long as, and this is why the Estonian model is interesting. The Estonian model requires a degree of transparency and openness and the sharing of data, which might make some traditional Western liberals very uncomfortable. But I think that has to be a reality. So the sharing of data, or who owns the data needs to be public. Think of data like a public park. Think of data like the very things that have been destroyed in San Francisco, that city of shit. Where there are no parks, where there are no public space. The challenge for city managers is building that. It requires imagination, and they can't do it alone. They need entrepreneurs. So the people who come up with innovative schemes for reinventing, rethinking data, and placing it in the public space, and at the same time protecting our individual rights, they are the heroes of the future. They are the next generation Tim Berners-Lee. It's essential, this question. I'll tell you why. Because we as human beings, we as individuals over the last 300 years, our individualism, our democracy, our sense of self has been premised on our ability to separate ourselves from the outside. That's why cities, historically, old-fashioned industrial cities, that's why they're such great places. There are places of reinvention. Baudelaire wrote about this. There are places where you can be lost, where no one is watching you. They're places that guarantee rights. It's no coincidence that cities have been the core engine of democracy, and it's no coincidence today in countries like America that the new anti-democratic forces are hostile to cities and that they're situated in the countryside. This is a historical theme. So this question, the answer to the question of who owns the data, which the real question is who can see what and how we can protect our privacy, how we can push back surveillance capitalism or the surveillance state. It's the great question of the age. There are no simple answers. One thing to remember in particular, anyone who tells you that this can all be fixed by Bitcoin is talking shit. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please give a round of applause to Andrew Keen. Thank you so much.